guys, my name is Joe and welcome to my YouTube channel, Fighting Words, the Martial Arts Library. And on this channel, I will review martial arts books and I also go over other martial arts related subjects. And today I'm going to be reviewing the book Extreme Joint Locking and Breaking by Loren Christensen, published in 2006. Now, Loren Christensen is actually a pretty prolific author. I've reviewed at least one of his books, just one so far. And he's got a background in, I think, karate, traditional jiu-jitsu, I think a little arnis. He was also in MP in Vietnam, military police in Vietnam for the U.S. forces, and also became a law enforcement officer when he came back stateside. So this particular book, as the title would suggest, is about locking and breaking the joints. And Mr. Christensen is being very comprehensive in his scope here, because we're talking literally everything from like cervical vertebrae to the phalanges of the foot, the toes, in other words. So that's pretty broad. I'm going to go over this, chapter by chapter, because they each will address a specific joint to be locked. And the first one he starts off with is finger techniques. And he recommends that during the finger techniques, you actually hold the hand first, of course, and then start applying your techniques. He's got a few different ones, some are clear hyperextensions and others you're like pulling them apart from one another. I do like the fact that he's emphasizing you need to make sure that the hand can't move when you do this, because, if you just try to grab someone's finger in midair or something, it's just not going to work, or has a very low percentage of working. Only a Sith speaks in absolutes. After that, he goes on to wrist locks, and these are things I'm sure he's got a lot of experience with since his days in law enforcement. He actually does mention a story when he's bringing up that not all pain compliance techniques work on all people. He's talking about, having this guy chest first against a wall, and he's got his arm behind his back, and he's applying a wrist lock there to try to get the guy to comply. He won't comply, so he applies more pressure, and he won't comply, so he applies more pressure, and then there's a pop. And then the guy hands him his other hand. Like, okay, I guess you got me. I guess one broken wrist is better than two. In this case, he shows 3 particular locks with a few different variations. If you are familiar with Aikido, for instance, you're going to find some familiarity with these. After that, he goes into the elbow locks, and these are all hyperextension locks. In other words, the wrist moving away from the shoulder. So you're flexing the elbow past the point where it's supposed to stop, or extending past the point where it's supposed to stop. And these are everything from your classic self-defense move where, you're got the guy's hand palm up and you're breaking it over your shoulder while he's behind you, to the Jujigatame, the standard cross armbar, from the ground. And after that, he goes on to shoulder locks, and he shows 5 of those. To me, it seems like they were most used for, or many of them were used in more like arresting scenarios. And it should be noted that many of these are also compound locks. So, in addition to putting the guy's arm behind his back, you're also applying pressure on the wrist. So you're locking up the elbow by putting the arm behind the back, and then also reinforcing that lock, but, making the lock worse for the guy by also getting a wrist flex in there, for instance. So, those are sort of based on like putting the guy like face down. There's a lot of that going on in the shoulder lock section. From there, he goes into the section on neck locks. At this point, he does emphasize that there's a lot of potential danger with neck locks, although, as he points out, it might actually be less dangerous than you would have been led to believe. He talks about, when he first learned neck locks, it's like, oh, I thought anytime you bent the head, it would break the neck. Probably based on movies I saw. So it's nice to see him admitting that he had a little bit of learning to do in his development. But yeah, one of the things he shows is, if you'll reference back to the review I did on American Combat Judo, it would be what was described there as a pile driver, where he's like scooping, going between the legs from the front, reaching around to grab the guy's belt, and like scooping him off the ground and onto his neck. And he's talking about lifting the hips over the head to apply pressure to the neck. I'm just like, dude, you just turned the guy upside down and slammed him on the back of his head. We're probably lucky if he's not just knocked unconscious. Interestingly, one of the things that he shows is just a face-to-face sort of neck compression, where you sort of grab the back of the head like you might see in someone going for like a double collar tie or a Muay Thai clinch, and just shoving the guy's face towards his own sternum. And I've never tried that. I think that's an interesting idea. From there, after going for the cervical vertebrae, he talks about the back, which is the lumbar vertebrae. And there he's showing two moves, one of which is just a straight up Boston Crab, a professional wrestling move. The guy's on the ground on his back, and you pick up his legs, one in each arm, and then you roll him over to his belly and lean back. The other one is the guy's belly down, and you basically kneel on his lumbar and then grab his chin and pull back. Again, for the sake of comprehensiveness, I'm glad that he includes lumbar locks. After that, he goes to the knee, where this is definitely all groundwork. He's showing 2 knee bars, basically, and a knee compression. From there, he moves on to the ankle. Shows 4 different locks, including the straight ankle lock, as you might expect. And then it's an ankle crank. Oftentimes it's called a toe hold. But hold on, because the next chapter is on locks against the toes. 3 of them, he's showing 3 of them. One of them is basically the same thing. It's going to exert more pressure on the ankle than it is the toes. It's a figure 4 toe hold. There is a little bit of a distinction between how he's doing it here and how he was doing it in the last chapter, but in my experience, that's simply a variation on the grip you're using. The pressure is more or less the same. But what's also interesting is that one of these things, he goes from a kick catch. Somebody does a front kick at you, and you scoop their leg under their ankle with your elbow. Then you reach up and start snapping their toes. Again, I commend him on being complete here. Trying to get at least at least 2 locks for every major joint. I guess except for the hips, technically. But I'm just like, number one, under what circumstances would somebody kick you barefoot in an environment where you could break their toes? And number 2, if you've got them on one leg, why would breaking their toes be your best move? You can kick the other leg out from under them, or you foot sweep them, or drag them out and do a split, or If you've got it in that position, there goes your figure four toe hold again, right there. If you just want to go into like a major joint lock, but I don't know. I'm more tickled by that than anything. And I should mention that in each chapter, it will talk about the sort of injury that can occur to that particular joint. So the difference between a sprained finger and a dislocated finger. I really value that bit. So, pros and cons. So for the pros, I really like that section on the injury profiles, I guess. Like what sort of injuries can happen to this particular joint. And it's included up front in the sections. It's not first, it's more like a sidebar. But you get them before you get to the actual locks themselves, which I think is very helpful because, like, hi, these are the effects you're going to be causing. I also like the simplicity of most of the techniques. Most of them are very simple. And also I appreciate the thoroughness. As I've mentioned, we're doing, literally from head to toe. The hips are absent. I guess you could include those when it comes to like the locks on the back. But yeah, pretty thorough. Gives you something for every joint you're going to encounter, except for the hips. As far as the cons go, I gotta say it, I think I'm spoiled by having gotten trained in groundwork in a few different, like judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, combat, submission wrestling, and Mark Hatmaker Fu. All in wrestling, I guess, is what he would call the grappling portion of what he does. But it's hard for me to not be critical of groundwork when I don't think that it's very good. For instance, he shows what is theoretically a Jujikatame from guard. It's not. Or if you were going to attempt in a straight arm lock against somebody who's standing over you and you're there in your guard, which that's what he calls it, it's not very well established as a position. You need to elevate the hips and then cut an angle so you get an optimum position. And, he's not showing that. He's just like, throw your legs around their head and then straighten their arm against your leg. Like, there are better ways to do that. And again, for the leg locks, there are better ways to do that. It might be adequate against somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. And things like that Boston Crab. Getting into it the way he's showing how to get into it, I'm not sure if that is going to be viable against somebody who is fighting back, who is anywhere close to your weight class. Unless you're doing this on, a child, I'm unsure if you will get it against somebody who is conscious and fighting back. But I say that, but we've also seen at least one instance of it in MMA. But then again, the guy who got wasn't very good on the ground. Anyway, so yeah, when it comes to the ground stuff, we have better resources today for those things. So recommendations, if you can find it for cheap, Paladin Press was the original publisher of this. I think a lot of his books are being published through YMAA. I don't recall if this particular book was. I'll have a little bar underneath here if it is. But if you can pick it up for relatively cheap, I think it has some decent ideas and techniques for some of the standing stuff. unless you are working in an environment where you are required to restrain people, I wouldn't suggest making this a particularly big focus. But yeah, it's okay for that purpose. Ignore the ground stuff. I don't consider it very good. So yeah, so that's my review. Again, it's okay, and I'm glad I have it because I think out of all the texts I have, because I got traditional jiu-jitsu and chin-na and catch wrestling and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and judo and sambo and all these different grappling styles or styles that incorporate aspects of grappling. And I think this is the only text I have where someone is showing you how specifically to break somebody's toes. So as someone who's a bit of a completionist, I guess that's good. But yeah, it's an alright book. It's alright. And anyway, that's all I have for this week, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for watching.